Hi, I'm Lauren Gleason. I'm a registered dietitian and board certified specialist in kidney nutrition. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about why calcium is so important for people who make calcium oxalate stones. Common myth that I hear with people who develop calcium-based kidney stones, particularly calcium oxalate stones, is that you need to avoid eating calcium to help prevent your body from making stones out of calcium. And it does kind of make sense, but in this video, I'm going to be explaining why you actually need to be eating more calcium if you want to avoid calcium oxalate stones. So let's dig into this. So we already know that calcium and oxalate like each other. They like each other so much that they join together and form crystals that can then join with other crystals and ultimately make a bigger crystal that we call a stone. And then we have to pass that stone out of our body in what's usually a really painful ordeal. One strategy to preventing these stones from forming is to simply prevent calcium and oxalate from being in the urine. And that is actually a good strategy. If there isn't much calcium or oxalate in our urine, then the chances of developing a stone go down dramatically. That's a fact. But how do we actually go about preventing a bunch of calcium and oxalate in our urine? Well, when it comes to calcium, the best way to prevent a bunch of calcium from being in your urine is to actually cut back on your sodium and sugar intake. Both sodium and sugar cause the body to spill calcium into the urine, and most of that calcium is calcium that came from your bones, not your diet. So avoiding calcium in your diet is not actually going to make a dent in your urine calcium because your body will just keep pulling it from your bones if your sodium and sugar intake are high. So avoiding calcium is not going to help lower your urine calcium. Ironically, avoiding calcium actually causes your urine oxalate levels to go up. And the reason for this goes back to the whole premise that calcium and oxalate really like to stick together. When you stop eating calcium, the oxalate that is hanging around in your gut from the food that you eat doesn't have its buddy anymore. And when it doesn't have its buddy calcium, it is really, really, really easy for your body to absorb oxalate. And what goes into the body must come out. So when you start to absorb more oxalate, you'll pee more oxalate. It's just how it works. When calcium is in the gut at the same time as the oxalate, they buddy up like they love to do, and your body can't absorb these little calcium oxalate crystals when they're in your gut. So they go right through you and you poop them out. And not to be crude, but I think most people would prefer a calcium oxalate crystal to come out their butthole rather than their pee hole. Um, so getting enough calcium in your diet is really, really, really important to lowering the amount of oxalate in the urine because the calcium in the food will prevent oxalate from being absorbed into the body in the first place. So how much calcium do we need? Well, the goal is to get about 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams of calcium per day. And that's the recommended amount for adults who don't make stones and the recommended amount for adults who do make stones. So there's not really a difference between the recommended amount. Now, a couple things to keep in mind about getting enough calcium. First off, food is best. So studies have shown that calcium from food does the best job at binding the oxalate and preventing the absorption. When you start trying to get more calcium into your diet, focus first on how you can increase your calcium intake from foods. Calcium from supplements can sometimes backfire and actually increase your risk of stones because supplemental calcium is more likely to increase calcium in the urine because it's really easy to overdo it. Dairy products are an obvious source of calcium, but they are often higher in sodium. So just be sure that you're making changes to your diet to offset this sodium. Totally doable, but it's something to be mindful of. If you need to take a supplement, and there are cases where supplements are necessary, be sure that you're not taking too much. I typically recommend that people use a nutrition tracker of some sort to input their food for a week to get a sense of how much calcium they're getting, and then use that number to figure out how much supplemental calcium they need. So for example, if your only major calcium source each day is some milk in the morning and you're getting about 300 milligrams for that milk, don't assume that you need to supplement with 900 milligrams of calcium. A lot of foods have calcium in them, and you're probably getting some additional calcium from the rest of your diet. Maybe in reality, you only need 500 milligrams of additional calcium. If that's the case, we definitely don't want to supplement with 900 and increase our risk that that extra 400 milligrams ends up in our urine causing stones. It also matters when you take it. So don't take a calcium supplement on an empty stomach. Remember, the whole point of getting in adequate calcium for stone prevention is for that calcium to be in your gut at the same time as the oxalate. Supplements should be taken with food. And again, getting the calcium from food is the top choice, but there's certainly circumstances where supplements are needed. So, hopefully, after hearing my little spiel, you're on board with getting enough calcium. Eating more calcium is much easier than following a low oxalate diet, and most calcium oxalate stone formers do not need to go out of their way to avoid oxalate. Sure, cut back on spinach. And if there was, a particular food that's on the high oxalate list and you were eating a ton of it, maybe consider cutting back. But it's not necessary to avoid every single food that's high in oxalate. And keeping up with which foods are high in oxalate is honestly a mind-boggling juggling act because I swear every website says different stuff about what foods are high, what foods are low. Focus first on getting adequate calcium, cutting back on sodium, and getting adequate fluids. I'll talk about good sources of calcium in another video. In the meantime, definitely start keeping a food diary and logging your food intake so you can get a sense of how much calcium you're currently getting, so you have a better idea of how much more you need to add. If you've got more questions about calcium oxalate stones, feel free to leave a comment. I do read the comments. I use them to help me figure out what videos to post next. And if you found this video helpful, I would love it if you gave it a thumbs up. And if you want to learn more about kidney stone prevention and get recipes designed for kidney stone prevention, you can sign up for my free newsletter. You should see a pop-up somewhere on the screen inviting you to sign up, and I'll also leave a link in the description of this video. Can't wait to hear from you.